Victory in the final round seemed certain.
If they won the elections, they planned to create a fundamentalist one-party state under Islamic law. They accepted the principle of one man, one vote, but only once. After winning, they would abolish democracy.
The government panicked and cancelled the final round. The GIA grew out of this outpouring of rage. Its members terrorized Algeria's cities and countryside. Whole villages were wiped out. Intellectuals and journalists murdered. The feared ninjas exacted revenge. The battle between the military and Islamist extremists now opened an ominous new chapter in the age of terror. In Paris, with stalemate in Algeria, the government was still pressing for the go-ahead to intervene. Families waited helplessly as the drama unfolded. In Mallorca, the GIGN were also waiting. In Algiers, the hostages prepared to endure their first night on the plane.
We called the third hijacker the nutcase because he talked rubbish all the time. He would say, "We are holy warriors, mujahideen." He was the one who talked about the mujahideen the most. "We have come here to die." And he said to the male passengers, "Do you realize how lucky we are? We are going to die as mujahideen for our faith, for Allah, and there are 72 virgins waiting for us in paradise."
That first night was hellish. He spent the entire night walking up and down the aisles, holding his Quran and reciting verses from it. The night seemed endless. The passengers were silent. It was like being pulled down by a lead weight, drowning in these prayers. It was so claustrophobic, a world with no freedom, being forced to listen to these endless verses.
That night, there was a full moon. The ground seemed to be made of silver, and there were all these white birds. And the tarmac was glittering in the light of the moon. It was absolutely beautiful. I just sat there gazing out in admiration and thinking to myself how bright it was out there and how dark it was here inside. Then the nutcase walked by, and I think that he must have been intrigued by the way I was looking out. So he looked out too, and then he said, "Each of those birds will take a soul up to paradise."
On day 2, the crisis suddenly took on a chilling new dimension. A mole inside the GIA working for French intelligence told his handlers that this was no ordinary hijack.
L'information que nous avions eue nous avait été transmise directement.
We received this information directly from members of the Algerian Secret Service. Not from anyone at the top, but from a local contact who spoke to some of our own people. And this information was very worrying. The terrorists' true aim was to crash the plane in Paris.
Police later raided a safe house and found a GIA propaganda leaflet that confirmed that the real intention of the hijacking was a suicide attack on the French capital. Inside the plane, there was still no sign of the deadlock being broken. Christophe Morin was convinced he was going to die. He summoned the courage to confront one of the hijackers.
And I managed to find the strength to say to him, if I'm going to be killed, whoever my murderer turns out to be, I want him to look me straight in the eye as he kills me. I didn't want them to kill me with a shot in the back of the head like the other passengers. I wanted to look at my murderer in the eye.
And what did he say to you?
He said to me, don't worry, even if you die, you'll go straight to heaven where you will find 72 virgins waiting for you. You will die as a martyr, so there's nothing to be afraid of. Why are you frightened? I had no answer to that. So I just said, all I know is that we seem to be on a journey that will end in death.
In Mallorca, the GIGN was still on red alert after a long, cold night at the deserted airport.
I got up at about 6 a.m. I'd barely slept, and looked out at the surrounding countryside. The airport was completely empty. There wasn't a sound.
They were still waiting for the green light from Paris. But the Algerians were determined to resolve the crisis themselves. By now, the plane had run out of food. Meals were brought from the terminal and left at the top of the passenger steps, watched by the ninjas still surrounding the plane.
We have to go out the plane and take the food, and when we opened the door, I saw 2 dead people. It was awful. It was really, really hard. You have 2 dead people. In front of you, you have ninja. Behind you, you have terrorists. You have weapons, and you are the target. And you have to go down, take the trays, climb up, put the trays inside the plane.
Climb over the bodies again?
And again, and again, and again. And we were around 200 people on board, so you have 200 trays to carry up. And it was really, really hard.
As Christophe Morin distributed the meals throughout the cabin, he was confronted by the hijacker who'd already killed the 2 hostages.
The killer grabbed hold of the back of my neck and kissed my forehead. I was extremely puzzled by his gesture, and when he did it twice again, I became frightened. As I've explained, I was so wrapped up in the idea of dying that I thought this must be the kiss of death.
The hijackers were still demanding the removal of the stairs so the plane could take off. At 9 p.m, Yahya suddenly set a deadline. Unless they were allowed to leave by 9:30, he would start executing the hostages one by one every half hour until they were allowed to take off for Paris. He picked out a French hostage, Yannick Bergnay, a cook from the French embassy in Algiers. He was flying home to spend Christmas with his wife and children.
I could see he was a young man, He was a bit hunched over, as if he was trying to protect himself. And that's it. He just made his way to the cockpit. He was incredibly pale.
Yahya ordered Yannick to speak directly to the negotiators in the control tower.
Je m'appelle Yannick Bonnier, je travaille à l'ambassade de France et notre vie est en danger maintenant. Si vous faites rien, ils vont nous exécuter. Il faut absolument faire quelque chose de plus rapidement.
Then Yahya grabbed the microphone.
والله دوك نضربوه لكم من الباب الاخرى والله ما على بالنا بكم على بالكم رحتوا مع ناس عندهم عقيده المهم رايحين يولوا اللور